So good evening everyone, thanks for joining us tonight for tonight's Ontario Soccer Association webinar. We have a webinar tonight, should last no more than 30 minutes. Just before we get started, I wanted to inform you of an event coming up this weekend at the University of Guelph. It's the 2016 Ontario Soccer Association Soccer Summit. This is this weekend, March 4th, 5th and 6th at the University of Guelph. As you can see from the slide on your screen, we have a long list of wonderful presenters and clinicians, and we encourage you, if you haven't already, we encourage you to sign up for that event. Tickets are available. Tickets are available through the Ontario Soccer Association website, and we encourage you to take part in this wonderful weekend. There's speakers there for every part of the game, for coaches, administrators, match officials, board members. So again, I encourage you, if you haven't already, to sign up for that event. Before we get started on tonight's webinar, Fast Tracking and Player Development, I just wanted to bring you up to speed on 3 more webinars we have in this series, taking us up to the mid-April of this year. Following tonight's webinar, we have another on March 9th, 4 Up, 1 Up, and that's a pilot program that's been introduced this summer. Carl Horton, our Regional Manager of Player Development, will be hosting that webinar. We encourage you to sign up for that. Again, on March 30th, Let Us Play, which is another program being introduced this summer, introduced to all districts across the province. And that's a program that allows games to take place at the grassroots level. If a team is short players, traditionally the game could not take place. But now we've introduced this program called Let Us Play, and that will help you understand and explain how that program works. Carl Horton again will be delivering that webinar on March 30th. The last of the series, as you can see, on April 14th, delivered by Billy Wilson, is I'm a Grassroots Soccer Parent. And that webinar is designed for soccer parents of young players, and will give them tips and techniques that will allow them to make that soccer experience for their child a full and rewarding experience. So we encourage you to sign up for those webinars and pass it on to your friends and colleagues. Registration is available. This Wednesday's newsletter, hopefully you've signed up for the OSA newsletter. Registration links will be available in that newsletter, and then following on the OSA website. So we encourage you to register for those next 3 webinars that are coming up. So getting started on tonight's webinar, Fast Tracking and Player Development. By way of introduction, my name is Bobby Lennox. I'm the Manager of Player Development with the Ontario Soccer Association. With us tonight is my colleague Carl Horton. Carl is the Regional Manager of Player Development, and those of you who know Carl operates out of the west end of the province of Ontario and looks after all the clubs, coaches, districts, etc. in the west end of the province. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar, and as you can see on the right hand of your screen, there is a question area where you can ask questions, and Carol will be on hand to answer those questions. We have a big crowd with us tonight, so please be patient as Carol responds to your questions. We will leave the webinar open for several minutes at the end of the session to give Carol time to catch up and answer those questions. If we don't get to all the questions, they will be posted on the OSA website. Okay, so please feel free to ask Carl those questions and comments about the webinar and the program, and Carl will do his best to answer those questions for you. tonight, a couple of areas we're going to cover. The first thing we're going to talk about is holistic player, holistic person development. It's important to understand to have a full and well-balanced soccer player, we need a full and well-balanced human being. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the considerations of playing with older children, some of the considerations that coaches and parents should be aware of when thinking of having a child play with older children. We're also going to give some advice on when a child should play and when a child should not play with older children. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about understanding the evaluation process. There is a process that each child who wishes to play with an older age group must go through, and we'll guide you through that relatively simple process. So that's what's on tap for tonight, and we have several slides to help explain that. We want to talk about the developmental elements. Having children compete in practice in the correct environment, I'm sure you agree, is instrumental in their development as young people and as soccer players. The elements that have to be considered in that environment, as you can see in the diagram, are social, emotional, psychological, physical, and technical. We don't talk too much about tactical in the grassroots area, but certainly as the children go older, the technical and tactical corner, especially the tactical component, becomes more important. You've probably seen this diagram in many of the player development resources that have been created, and it's a model we always fall back to when we talk about holistic development of a soccer player and holistic development of a young person. Ensuring that children are appropriately challenged and supported in each of the 4 areas identified is crucial to their enjoyment and progression in the game. The challenge that clubs, technical directors, coaches and administrators have is making sure that every child is in the correct environment based on their abilities in all 4 corners of development. To add to the challenge, children develop at different rates and times. This puts an added burden on organizations to do the correct thing on this crucially important aspect of a child's holistic development. So as I'm sure you can all attest to, young children from week to week, if not month to month, can progress rapidly or regress rapidly in any of the 4 areas that we've identified in the model. So it's important that the children are monitored and managed through each of these 4 corners of their development. The next diagram I have for you is it's another diagram we've used several times in several of our presentations and talks, and we talk about a challenge for all. So you can see here the comfort zone. The comfort zone is the middle part of the diagram, the large red area right in the middle. We call this the comfort zone because that is where children and players put themselves when they're not challenged. We've all seen practices at times that are too easy, there's very few mistakes, and it looks very successful. This is not the best place for us as coaches to put players into. In the comfort zone, it's all too easy, and it's similar to doing a crossword puzzle that doesn't challenge you. You just fill in the puzzle without giving it too much thought. The answers come to you far too easily. It's also the equivalent of a child being at school, and as they get older, the child continues to do lessons that they would do in grade 1 or grade 2. The teachers don't challenge the children with more difficult assignments and more difficult lessons. So in our world, this is where children and players routinely get through practice without having any challenge. And we call that the comfort zone. The other extreme, you can see here as the blue part in the diagram, we call the stress zone. This is the complete opposite of the comfort zone. This is where the challenges that the children have are too stressful and too difficult, and there's no way they can meet the challenge. So again, not a good learning environment. This is an environment where the children are thinking about survival and how quickly can they get out of this stressful situation. The optimum area for the children to be in is this green band called the challenge zone. This is the area where it's not too comfortable, it's not too difficult, but the players are adequately challenged. The challenge is appropriate to the age and stage of development and the stage of the development they are at that particular time of the season. This, of course, changes. The challenge zone will change as they become more proficient at that particular skill or technique. The challenge zone will change, and they would fall back into the comfort zone as they become better at these various skills and techniques. So that challenge zone will always change, and that is where good coaching and good monitoring of player development from the coach will continue to keep the children in the challenge zone, out of the comfort zone, and out of the stress zone. This challenge zone is the area of optimal learning and the area where each individual child should be in. It's also interesting to note that in any group of players, be it at any level, so if you had a squad, for example, of 18 players, each individual in that 18-player squad would be in a different place. Some of those players may be in the comfort zone in a particular exercise or game you're asking them to perform. Some of them may be in the challenge zone with that same activity, and some of them may be in the stress zone with the same activity. So as a coach, understanding the different expectations and standards from each of the individuals that you're working with is really important to ensure that the children can meet the challenge successfully. They're not in the stress zone and they're not in the comfort zone. So that is a challenge for the coach. It's not too easy, but it's something that has to be looked at for the continued development of the young players. This statement is taken right from a resource that a lot of this information is taken from. The resource is available on the OSA website, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. But this statement, when the conditions are right, taking part in sport can support the development of the whole person. When they are not, it can lead to higher dropout rates and negative behaviours. And I'm sure as players and athletes in your own right, and even in places of work, if the environment is not conducive, if it's not supportive, if it's not a safe environment, if it's not one that you feel comfortable in, one you don't feel valued in, it can be detrimental to your continued involvement in that organisation. It's no different with young players. In fact, I would argue that it's multiplied with young players because of the lack of experience and knowledge they have. So it's crucial that we have young players, young people put in the correct environment that can support their entire development. Otherwise, as it says, it can lead to high dropout rates and negative behaviours. So this whole idea of putting children in the proper environment can't be taken lightly. Reasons to consider competing with older children. Intellectually gifted. Let's talk a little bit about that. So what this means is intellectually gifted, the children of his or her same age that the child is participating with at that particular moment may not provide the mental stimulation she or he needs to be satisfied with the interaction. So in other words, the child is operating at a higher intellectual level than the children in his or her current group of players. Technically advanced, that's a pretty simple one for soccer coaches to understand. And this manifests itself in children who've been involved in the sport from an early age. So for example, a player who'd be maybe 9 or 10 years of age, may have been involved in the sport from 4 or 5 years of age. so may have 4 or 5 years of experience in playing the sport, whereas another player may be relatively new to the sport and just entered maybe as an 8 or 9-year-old, so again less experience. So those children who have been in the sport longer typically display greater technical ability, and they may be more appropriately challenged by playing with older children. Emotionally and socially advanced. Children with a high social intelligence are able to manage complex interactions well. A socially mature child will be well accepted by older children and may enjoy activities that are typically associated with older children. So you see children who mingle freely and openly with different children. They're able to make friends quicker. They're able to hold discussions with various people. They're confident in their own skin, so to speak. Those children who are emotionally and socially advanced can play and can interact with older children and be quite successful. Another one that is easily identified by soccer people is those children who are physically and athletically developed. So these children who are physically and athletically developed may be able to compete with older children who have similar physical attributes. Some of these things that developed are in the areas of speed, agility, balance, and coordination. So not only are they maybe physically bigger, maybe 4 or 5 inches taller or 10, 12 pounds heavier, but greater speed, greater agility, better sense of balance and coordination. So that's what we mean by physically and or athletically more developed. So if your child or a player you work with displays these type of skills and qualities, they may want to consider playing at an older age group. In the correct environment, I mentioned this previously, but this is key, and we're going to stress on this several times tonight during the presentation, that putting children in the correct environment is key. Children in the wrong environment will not have as much fun, be less successful, not develop as well, and ultimately may quit the sport altogether. Therefore, it's vital that the assessment and evaluation of young people is treated with the importance it deserves, as the consequences can be quite severe, and probably the worst consequence we could have is a child leaving the sport. And research has shown that children who leave a team sport because of a bad experience typically do not get involved in another team sport. They may take up an individual sport, but the chances of them getting involved in a team sport are slim. So it's really key that we ensure these children are in the right environment. There are times when children should practice and compete with and against older children, and the assessment of a child's abilities to be successful and continue to develop should be treated very seriously and continually monitored. So again, if we decide that it's appropriate for the child to play with older children, how successful are they going to be? How much fun are they going to have? Will they continue to develop or will they stagnate? And again, mentioned before, potentially they could decide to fall out of the game. So that continuous monitoring of the child, and is he or she happy? Is he or she succeeding in that new environment? We've mentioned several areas, and it's important to remember that children must have advanced qualities in all areas mentioned previously to feel comfortable. Simply being skilled in one or two areas and then being placed in an inappropriately challenging environment, so that stress zone that we alluded to earlier in our diagram, will not lead to further social, psychological, or technical development for the child. So again, it's important that the children have advanced qualities in all areas mentioned previously. So think back to our four-corner model. They don't just excel in one area, but they excel in preferably all of those areas to maintain their continued growth and development in the game. Reasons not to compete with older children. Some of the reasons are here for you to see. So parental pressure on the club, coach to play their child with older kids. And some of you may have witnessed this, some of you may have seen this happening in your own clubs or neighbouring clubs, where parents or guardians put pressure on coaches or the clubs to play the child at an older age group, as they believe increased competition will aid development. Clubs usually allow this to happen in the fear of losing a registration fee. So obviously that's not a reason to put a child in an older age group. Again, that environment would not be correct for that child. It's not about the added registration fee, it's ensuring that child will continue to grow and develop. To stroke a parent's ego that their child is special, again, some of you may have come across this one. And as much as we all love our children, any parents out there, we all want our children to do well. Sometimes we can get a little bit narrow-minded. Having their child play with older players inflates the parent's ego as they believe they have a special child. Again, not a reason to compete with older children. That child would probably be unsuccessful and may decide to leave the game. Avoiding small-sided soccer to get to the real adult game quicker. How many times have we seen that one? This inaccurate thinking that small-sided soccer is of no benefit, and the quicker a young child gets to play 11v11, the better they will become. We're all very familiar with the piles and piles of research that have been done on the benefits of small-sided soccer. And as kids grow physically and cognitively, then the size of the field, the size of the goals, and the number of players in the field increase with that child's growth. So again, skipping past small-sided soccer to get to 11v11 is not a reason to compete with older children. We do not want to skip any of those stages of development. Organizations and coaches using it as a carrot to recruit players. Again, you may have heard of this. In a drive to increase club registrations, enticing players by offering to play them at older age groups. The unknowing parent believes this is a good situation for their child. So again, parents who may not be wise to the development of an athlete think, well, if I can skip some of this stuff, this club really wants my child, the club's going to play my child with older ages, that's what's best for my child. Again, may not be what's best for the child. So again, that's not a reason for a child to play with older players. Another one, to accelerate the development process, fast tracking a child through the development stages. The parents incorrectly think their child will become a better player quicker. As we know, soccer is a late specialization sport. We don't peak in soccer to 26, 27 years of age, and there's no way to fast track that. Many, many years must be spent practicing and playing within the correct development stage. So thinking, playing with older children is going to accelerate the development process may not be a reason to compete with older children. A quote from Rob Gill. Some of you will be familiar with Rob. Rob's been a very successful under-20 national team coach with the Canadian Soccer Association. And Rob was kind enough to share his thoughts with it as we were putting this program together. Rob will be speaking at this weekend's Soccer Summit in Guelph. So if you want to hear more from Rob, please register for the Soccer Summit in Guelph this weekend. But Rob's thoughts here is, what is wrong with a player dominating at their own age group? Why can't we challenge the player and their skill set without putting them into a new environment that may not be socially as good for their development first and foremost, let alone considering the physical, technical, and tactical implications. So Rob is saying here, that the social setting we're putting the child in may not be as developmentally strong for them. So there's some thoughts from Rob Gill, National Under-20 team coach. Let's talk a little bit about the formats of play and why formats of play are important in the development of young players. So I'm going to put them up here. You can see under 7. Under 7 in Ontario, we play 4v4 or 5v5. So that's 4v4 without a goalkeeper or 5v5 with a goalkeeper. At under 8, same as under 7, we play 4v4 without a goalkeeper or 5v5 including the goalkeeper. At 9 and 10, we play 7v7, and at 11 and 12, we play 9v9. Now, these formats of play, as shown on the diagram, have been designed to allow for maximum technical, physical, social, and psychological development of the young players during competition. If a young player was to pass or skip on a format of play, they could be missing out on an important phase of their individual development. So imagine a 7-year-old was to skip playing 5v5 and go straight to 7v7. Obviously, they're missing a huge component of their technical, tactical, physical, social, and psychological development. A child who misses on a format of play designed specifically for that developmental stage will forgo the opportunity to develop technically and tactically from experiences that are more frequent in the smaller game format. For example, an under 8 player who plays at U9 will miss playing at 5v5 and jump directly to 7v7. The added physical challenge due to the increased field size, along with the added cognitive challenge, meaning more decisions are made. This may be too much for the child to successfully handle and add to their stress and frustration. So again, we didn't want the children to be under this added stress and frustration, posing problems that they can't handle at those young ages. So as much as we think my child physically, maybe my child is taller and stronger than the other children of his or her age group, moving them up that cognitive challenge may be too much for them. More players in greater spaces means added decisions that have to be made. So again, that may put the child under some stress, not a safe learning environment for that child, and that may be a detriment to their growth and development. There's many resources on our OSA website that talk about the many benefits of small-sided games, and we encourage you, if you want more information on the benefits of the various formats of play, the various small-sided game, please visit our OSA website and have a look at those resources that are available for you. Some considerations for the parent and the coach. So let's talk about the physical considerations. So as we can probably appreciate, playing with older players can put additional physical stress on the young player. The game is quicker and more physical than they're accustomed to, and the young player has to physically do more to be a part of the new team. So that's some of the considerations physically for the parents and the coach to think about. Psychological stress. So the psychological stress put upon the young player as he or she strives to keep up with the older players who may be more accomplished as the group they have just left can be mentally taxing and frustrating for them. So we have to think about those psychological stresses a child would be under in practice, and especially in competition environments when there's many decisions that have to be made, that those children may be more accomplished in those areas because they have a minimum of 12 months added development in that area. Confidence, huge when we're involved in sports and huge for young children. So this young player who had been moved up to play with older players loses the status they once had. In the original team, he or she would have been the team leader, or sometimes referred to as the go-to guy, would have been successful and get lots of playtime. In the older team, they will likely become just one of the players and lose the status they enjoyed and once had. This can negatively affect the child's confidence, self-esteem, and ultimately their enjoyment of the game. So something else to take into consideration when we're thinking about moving our players, our young players, to play with older groups. The next stage we're going to talk about, the last one, is the developmental stage. And a little diagram there shows the children as they move up through the various stages of the game in Ontario, from 3v3 all the way to 11v11 at U13. So if you were to imagine a child who missed a format of play designed specifically for that developmental stage, will forgo the opportunity to develop technically and tactically from experiences that are more frequent in the smaller game format. I'm repeating myself here, but I think this is important. A U8 player who plays at U9 will miss playing 5v5 and jump directly to 7v7. Obviously, the added physical challenge due to the increased field size, cognitive challenge means more decisions to be made. This may be too much for the young child to successfully handle. So some huge considerations for the parents and coach to think about as they consider moving their child to play with older players. Put this little matrix together, maybe help some people understand. So if we look at the four areas here, possibly appropriate to play up, most likely appropriate to play up, not appropriate to play up, and unlikely appropriate to play up. So let's have a little look here. So for a child who's physically average or behind, and cognitively average or behind, it's likely not appropriate for that child to play up. A child who's physically ahead and cognitively ahead is most likely appropriate for that child to play up. A child who's physically ahead and cognitively average or behind, possibly appropriate for that child to play up with older players. A child who's physically average or behind and cognitively ahead, unlikely appropriate to play up. And again, ideally, the young player would be ahead in all four corners that we have discussed previously. The four corners being physical, technical, tactical, social, emotional, and psychological. If the young player is advanced at all these four corners, ensures that they have a very good opportunity of having a positive and successful experience when they play with older players. So hopefully that little matrix will help in your decision-making process. For the coaches out there, coaches, please, a little table here. Coaches, please do appreciate that all young players are growing and maturing at a different rate. And we can see that by week, month to month with these young players. Do be patient, supportive, encouraging with all the players in your squad. The late developers, the early developers, the average players. Be patient and supportive with them all. Understand that all some players need is time. As mentioned earlier, there's players who enter the game really young. There have got players entering the game as young as 3 and 4 years of age. And there's some young players who don't enter maybe till 8, 9, 10 years of age. and all they need is some time to develop the various skills and qualities they need. Also, that has to be taken into account that the children who are born in the earlier part of the year against the children who are born later in the year. We call that the relative age effect, or some people call it the age bias effect. So if you were to imagine a child born in January and a child born in December playing in the same team, playing in the same group, the child born in January would have 11 months of added development. So it physically more developed, technically more developed, athletically more developed, cognitively more developed. So again, the child born in December, given added time, could potentially catch and overpass the child born in January. But again, it's making sure that we give them enough time to do that. Coaches, please don't mistake levels of physical maturity for maturity in other areas. And this is an area you may have seen, you may have witnessed yourself, where we see the tall kid, the kid who's physically more mature, gets selected because it's an easy pick, isn't it? To see the big, strong, fast kid who's physically mature, athletically mature, but may not be mature in other areas: psychological, cognitive, social development. But the coach sees a big, strong player, and he or she gets picked ahead of the others. So please don't mistake physical maturity for maturity in other areas. Don't assume that the current success of a player is an indicator of ongoing proficiency. I've certainly got lots of experience with this, where we see a young player at 7, 8, 9 years of age who may be way ahead of another young player of a similar age, but in 5, 6 years' time, the roles are reversed, where the player who was way advanced as a younger player, the development stalls, and the younger player, the player who was not as advanced as a young player overtakes them. So using a young player's proficiency today, a young 8-year-old, doesn't mean that young player will be the same type of player when they're 12, 14 or 15 years of age. Don't overburden the players that represent the extreme early or late developer. So sometimes with the early developer, that would be the little star in our team, we overburden them, and it actually can stall their growth. We give them too much responsibility, we give them too much to do, we ask too much of them, and it puts them in an environment that they don't feel comfortable. The same with the late developer, where we're constantly pushing them and pushing them and pushing them to catch up. Again, puts them under stress and not an enjoyable environment for that young player to enjoy playing in. A statement: each young player is on their own unique journey of growth, maturity and change, all of which is difficult to predict, both in terms of when it starts, when it stops, and what the final outcome will be. I'm sure you've all read many stories, you may have witnessed some yourself, where you've witnessed a young superstar and you think there's a star in the making. That young player is going to go on and become a pro, or play for Canada, or go off to a university scholarship. And in fact, they don't. Early developer may not develop into the player we may think they are going to be. Each player is on their unique journey of growth. It's difficult to predict what the outcome is going to be with each and every player. Just be patient with them, provide a good, supportive, safe learning environment, and their journey will take them to where they need to go. Let's talk a little bit about the evaluation process. So this little flow chart helps you understand the evaluation process from start to finish. And it starts with a discussion with a coach and technical director who identifies a grassroots player who he or she feels has advanced skills and qualities in all the areas we've been speaking about tonight. And he thinks they should be considered to play with an older age group. So then the following takes place. Obviously there's a discussion with the team coach, the technical director has that discussion to establish a history on the player and a consistency in their performance and behaviour. If this discussion on the player's history proves to be positive, an agreement is made that the young player should be considered to play with an older age group, then a discussion with the player and his or her parents or guardians should take place. This formal discussion should inform the player and the parents of the information that is contained within this document and is also contained within this webinar. The document I refer to is the Fast Tracking and Player Development resource that is available on the OSA website. The family should be made aware of information and the challenges that the young player may face when playing with older players. So some of the items we've discussed tonight. It's important that no pressure is put on the young player to play with the older group. I've experienced that myself, receiving phone calls from families who felt pressure from the club to play their child with older players, when really the child is very happy at the group they're with, and the club has put extreme pressure on the family to play the child, with older children. So no pressure should be put on the player or the parents to have their child compete with older players. The player must be allowed to stay within their own age group if that is their choice. The evaluation process that's laid out in the evaluation forms must be followed, and we're going to spend a few minutes towards the end of the presentation talking about that. And as you can see, signatures from technical director, parents, and the player and the district association must be on the form. So everyone agrees this evaluation has taken place, and they're all in agreement with information on the evaluation, and they're all in agreement that the child should be considered to play with an older age group. We are advising the district association and the club to keep a copy of these forms for their records. So that is in a nutshell how the evaluation process would work. And the evaluation process is quite neatly laid out on the forms and explains how the process should work. Evaluation is for U7 to U12 players only. Does not apply to younger age groups, and at 13 years and older, any players in that age bracket, the various leagues have different rules and regulations for kids playing with older teams. So for players 13 and older, I would ask that you chat with your district league or the league you're competing in to find out what their rules are regarding playing up. It's a 4-corner evaluation. We've spoken about that tonight, but when you see the evaluation form shortly, you'll see the children are evaluated in all 4 corners of their development. We would like an experienced, knowledgeable and qualified technical director to perform and manage the assessment. So the type of discussions that should be taking place with the player and the coaches. So on the social skills within the group, the types of things that the technical director and the coach should be looking for is that the young player under consideration a leader or a follower. Does he or she accept responsibility and take charge, or do they stay in the background and not get involved? Is he or she comfortable with strangers and outsiders who come into the group? Are they comfortable in making decisions for themselves on and off the field? And when we talk about overtime, that is some of the discussions that the technical director should have with the coach and the parents. The person who's performing the evaluation, so typically a technical director who's performing the evaluation, must see the player practice and play over a longer period of time, making an assessment after seeing the player once or maybe never at all. And I've had that in some cases where a technical director takes someone else's word about the player. The technical director must see the player practice and play and have those discussions over a period of time to ensure the young player is placed in the correct developmental environment. If it's a one-off visit to a practice and the technical director makes a quick judgment based on a 45-minute or 1-hour practice, potentially that young player could be put in the wrong environment, and may eventually the consequence would be they don't enjoy themselves, they don't grow and develop as a young player and a young person, and ultimately they may decide to quit the game. So it's important that those young players are put in the right environment and we take the time to ensure the young player is treated well. So what we see here is a copy of the resource we've chatted about tonight. This is a front and back page. It's a 4-page document. So if you were to download this or view it on the OSA website, this is the type of document you would get. A lot of the information tonight has been taken from this document. So we encourage you to have a look at that document, download it for your records or save it on your computer, and the location, the web address is below there where you can visit that resource and have a look at it or download it. Okay. So the evaluation form. The evaluation form is a 1-page form, front and back, as you can see here. Again, it's available. It's part of the same resource. So if you were to download the fast tracking and player development resource, attached to the back of the resource would be an age-specific form. So this form, as you can see, is for U7 and U8 player. So for a U7 who wants to play up to U8. So you would find that form on the OSA website, identified as such, and that's a form you would review. So as you can see, the form is for 1 playing season. It's important that it's done for the summer season, and then if the child is playing in an indoor winter season, it's done for that winter season. There's an area here where the player's name goes. Player's name, date of birth, the club, district association, and the technical director's name. You can see here, this is the first one is the psychological development of the child. And the technical director, after witnessing the child practice and having those discussions, watching the child play over an extended period of time, would simply mark X's into those areas. So as you can see, the identification key above 1 would be below average, goes all the way to 4. If you were to mark a 4, that would tell you the child excels in that particular area of the 4-corner development. So we have psychological, then we have physical, we have social emotional, and the last area of technical. So each of the forms, there are 3 different forms. The one you see here is for 7 and 8. We have another form for 9 to 11, and another form for 12-year-olds who want to play with 13-year-olds. Each form is different, so please make sure you download and complete the correct form, because the criteria in each of those 4 development stages gets more advanced and more extensive as the children grow and develop. So it's key that you make sure that you have a look at the correct form and complete the correct form. And then last but not least, down in the bottom of the form, an area for signatures of the technical director, signature of the parent, signature of the player, and last but not least, signature of the district technical director or district technical rep, and they should keep a copy of the form for their records. Okay. So following discussions with the player and the player evaluation is deemed that the child is exceptional and displays qualities that make their continued participation with children their own age detrimental to their development, and for their continued growth and development, they should be placed in an older age program. Ideally, the child should be in that program for at least an entire season, unless during the club's monitoring of the young player, the child's progress or happiness is stalled, and it's then deemed to be a detriment to their development. At that point, the young players should return to their original same age program. Using young players as fill-ins for one-off or two-off games due to someone being away, absent or sick is not what's best for the individual's overall development. Moving them up and down, game to game or week to week is not the ideal way to develop a young person. Decide which program is best for the individual's growth and place them into that program, preferably at the start of the season. Uh, this has been used in Ontario for many, many years, where a team, an older age team, needed a player. They were short a player for whatever reason, and they would call the younger age group below to send them a player. If that player needs to play with an older group player, an older group team, excuse me, then if that's the best environment for that child to be in, for their continued growth and development, that's where the child should be. Otherwise, you should not be playing with an older age team. So again, treat this very seriously. We're looking at the athletic lives of young children and want them to continue playing the game, soccer for life as we call it. Putting them in the wrong environment, even for one or two games, may be detrimental to their health, detrimental to their development. So please ensure that we're putting the player in the right environment that's best for the long-term development. Sending them up and down for one or two games is not what's best. They're just filling a void. So please take that seriously. So in summary, players can play 1 year older. The evaluation is good for one season. Just to jump back, players can play 1 year older starting at 7 years of age. So in Ontario, only players 7 years of age or older can play with an older age group. The evaluation is good for one season, a summer or winter season. As we all know, children can progress or regress from month to month, so it's important to constantly monitor and check on them. Assessment over a longer period. Evaluation of a young player over a short period is not recommended. The child could be having a good day or a bad day based on external influences. It's only fair on the child to give them as long an evaluation period as possible. So we're going to look at them for one game or one practice, and making a decision based on that is not fair on the child. Assessment by knowledgeable, caring technical staff. Technical leaders in the club who are unbiased and are only concerned with the child's overall development and growth as a player and as an individual should complete the assessment. Okay. So hopefully that technical director in the club is unbiased and will make a qualified decision, a qualified judgment on the child's ability to be successful in an older age group. We recommend that the players are closely monitored. Are they being successful? Are they happy in the new environment? Checking constantly with the child and monitoring his or her interaction and behaviour with the new group will give you a good idea on how they are progressing or not. Something we don't want to see is a young player being evaluated to play with an older age group and gets limited playing time. Obviously, that's not going to help their development as a soccer player, and it'd be best if they played or stayed and played with their own original age group. Placing children in the correct environment is crucial to their overall development. Don't take your responsibility lightly. As parents, coaches, technical leaders, we want all the children in our care to be successful. Placing them into the correct environment is it's important to the development. Placing them in the incorrect environment can have great consequences for their future success or even participation in the game. So getting close to wrapping up, again, a quick snapshot of what the resource looks like, and we encourage you to have a look at that. It's on the OSA website. There is the address where you can find it. There are 3 forms, 3 age-specific, stage-specific forms. Have a look at the one that applies to the age group you're working with. It is a 4-page document that includes plus the evaluation forms, excuse me. Reading the document and reading the forms will help you a better understanding of the program. So that's all we have for you tonight. I thank you very much for your participation and taking part in tonight's webinar. Hopefully it helped you understand the program of fast tracking and player development and the new direction from Ontario Soccer on moving players to play with older players. Again, I'll leave you with the Soccer Summit details. I encourage you to have a look, and if you haven't already signed up and purchased your tickets for this weekend's event, we encourage you to do so. You can see the address where you would get those tickets right there on the website, on the page. So thank you very much for joining us. We will continue to take questions for the next several minutes. Carol's been busy answering questions, and we will leave the website open for the next several minutes to allow Carol to answer some more questions. So thank you very much for participating, and hopefully you'll sign up for the Soccer Summit and sign up for the remainder of our webinars in this series. Thank you very much.